I came to Pemberton chasing banality like a hound a rabbit, and found instead a lush, slow beauty so insistent and particular that it frightened me. After my initial visit to Tish to scout the lay of the land and attend the interviews Charlie had arranged for me, I think I would have backed out of the whole thing, except that by that time Tish had found a place for Hillary and me to live. "You have to come now," she said. "You've got to get that child settled down before school starts. And you've got to settle, too." Tish was neither a fool nor a bully, and she had been a loving friend for close to 20 years. Tish Griffin, my roommate at Emory University in Atlanta, always held that I lived, moved, and had my being, as the Book of Common Prayer puts it, in flight from my father. He was a squat, roaring black Greek who kept a small grocery store in the blue-collar section of Atlanta where we lived. And from long before my birth to the day he died, he drank liquor and embarrassed my mother and me. I remember the youthful anguish that his behavior and the snickers of my schoolmates caused me. But I remember loving him, too. "It's a classic escape mechanism," Tish said to me one April night during our sophomore year. I had for a few months been going out with her boyfriend's roommate, like him, a junior at Emory Medical School. Tish had been going with Charlie Coulter so long that their wedding was as fixed in her firmament as our familiar stars. But I had only met Chris Calhoun when Charlie's old roommate flunked out and Chris moved in. I had that spring evening announced to Tish that I'd marry Chris in 3 seconds flat if he asked me. "Escape mechanism," Tish said. "Get away from Daddy as fast and far as you can. And what's further away than Chris Calhoun? He's not worth you. He's too pretty. He's too rich. He's like a corrupted elf or something." I snapped back. "How do you know it's not my mother I'm trying to escape?" And knew in that instant that it was true. My mother was a flower of old Mobile society, according to her earliest bedtime stories, caught in a brutalizing marriage to a Greek god gone to seed. From my earliest memory, it was as if they had a kind of mad joint custody of me. I lived half the time in his careening tenure, loving him, and half in her kingdom of cobwebs, adoring her. He frightened me sometimes, but my mother made me afraid. To this day, she will not see it. For a short period of time, I confronted her with it. "You overprotected me to the point that I thought I wasn't capable of simply living in the world," I said. "It was always, 'Don't do that, you'll get hurt. You can't do that by yourself.'" "Oh, Toot," she said. "I gave you the only kind of upbringing that matters in this world, the kind that makes you a lady. You can be very sure that Mr. Christopher Calhoun would never have looked at you if I let you grow up the way you say you wanted to, Missy." By the time I reached college, I no longer took people home with me, both because of my father's drunkenness and my mother's by then refined Blanche Dubois act. I stuck fiercely to my studies and my sorority sisters, aping slavishly each tiny detail of dress, speech, and behavior that struck me as normal. In fact, I did not for a long time know what normality was. It was what drew me to Christopher. Much, much later, I saw that there was within me an essential, if deeply buried, appetite for outrage, for dangerous excess. But in the beginning, I knew nothing except that I wanted Chris, and he incredibly wanted me. He asked me if I would marry him, and I said yes. The first thing he said after that was, "Can I, for Christ's sake, touch you now?" And so the lovemaking began. There was no longer any reason for my pulling away from Chris except the real one, fear. It was my mother's longest-lived legacy to me. My fear was justified. After the first great stabbing pain as Chris entered me, I was lost, swallowed, drowned. I screamed for Chris to stop. I was utterly gone in panic. It had been this fear, then, that waited for me in my own body, not the world's fears, pregnancy, disgrace. This one, the fear of vanishing altogether from the face of the earth. Chris did not stop. When it was done the last time, I began to cry. It was like dying. "I know," he said, grinning. "They say it is like that, when it's the best it can be." After that, we did it only once a night.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?